All right, everyone. Hi, welcome to the video. We got some special guests today. We got some MVPs from around the world. We got Jantor Pedersen from Norway, Ben Thomas all the way from New Zealand. Everyone, hello. I'm Ernie Costa. I'm over in the United States. We're going to be chatting about just the news that came out of Microsoft Ignite. Some cool things. I'm sure you've all seen it if you've been following on Twitter or on YouTube or through the Ignite sessions, whatever your main source of information is. But you know, the three of us, none of us work for Microsoft, but we've been involved with that in that ecosystem in that world for years. So we've got some opinions on it that we want to talk about from just from an ISV, from some MSP, from a cloud service provider's point of view, and obviously from a hardware vendor's point of view. So this is going to be a little bit candid. We're not going to be rah-rah cheerleaders the whole time. We're going to be speaking our minds, how we feel, the pros and cons. The first biggest news, I think, is software assurance changes, license changes that are coming to Azure Stack HCI. So I'm going to let you two actually kind of give your opinions first, because for me, as a normal consumer of Windows Server data center licenses, this is good and it's easy, but there's some nuance there. So why don't you guys tell me how this affects your life?
Yeah, cool. Yeah, well, I mean, so as a service provider, much like JT, we cover a number of customers as well, from everything their own hardware to, I mean, we're extending into hosting for customers as well. So the interesting one right up for us, it doesn't change service provider licensing agreements yet. So if you're a hoster and you're using SPLA licensing today, there's no change on how that impacts Azure Stack HCI. At the moment, so we're still got our fingers crossed that's coming down the line. However, if you're a CSP provider or a customer who's got EA, now you can take your existing Windows Server licensing and apply it over to Azure Stack HCI, which is removes one of those huge barriers we've had in the past with customers who they have this investment already, whether they're on VMware or whether they're on existing Hyper-V deployments, and they've bought data center, they've got the EA agreements, they've continue to have their software assurance kept up to date, and moving to HCI, they've now got a license uplift to have on a monthly OPEX on top of it. So this removes that initial barrier of having an OPEX uplift if they're used to that that renewal cycle of their EA agreements. So that's going to be a huge benefit to those customers now, not having to find that extra cash in the OPEX budget to get across to the more modern Azure Stack HCI.
Absolutely. JT, you guys deal with things a little bit differently. How is this going to affect you and your customers from like a consumption standpoint?
Well, it depends. We're not 100% sure how it will affect us yet as a CSP provider. Of course, the consumption will go away, and for as a SI partner as well, with the it might we can provide funding based on Azure consumption. So it might we don't know how it will affect it yet. So I think we need to for a CSP standpoint, it's unclear yet. But of course, for the clients, it's a huge step in the right direction of aligning your Windows Server data center license with Azure Stack HCI to give you a cheaper option. SA is not cheap, but it's cheaper than Windows Server data center license plus HCI license.
No, I definitely. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah. So but it's going to be interesting having these discussions with Microsoft about the CSP, how it will affect the CSP. So yeah, it's not been said how it will affect the CSP yet. I'm hoping we will get that clarified in the next couple of weeks, as we're doing a few installations in the next couple of months. So it needs to be addressed quite quickly.
Have you guys had customers that are on like traditional server, let's say 2016, 2019, probably not 2022, but an older version of server that hesitant, that were hesitant to upgrade to, or in this case, like lift and shift to Azure Stack HCI, migrate over because of maybe licensing concerns or the cost concerns? Because I know it was a problem internal with us at Commvault with a couple of our larger clusters.
Yeah, it's been.
certainly. Oh, you
Go
go,
ahead,
JC.
Okay. So yeah, in the initial talks with the client, it's taken a while. It's been a year since we started really pushing Azure Stack HCI with the clients, and it's taken this long to kind of until this spring, summer, to kind of get the clients on board, because the licensing was like, well, what are we getting for the HCI license? And with 22H2 and the new, and once we're starting to get the Azure Arc integrations and we're getting the Azure benefits, it's getting to the point where, yes, you're getting so much for free, well, for free, and you're getting the same benefits as an Azure VM, basically. At one point, we're coming back to what that actually entails right now, but yeah, it's still a hard sell. With SA, it will be an easy sell, because if you have an SA, you're already paying for it. It's not a problem. But if you're not an SA and you don't want to pay for it, then yeah, it's still a problem. But if you're coming from a VMware world, and with VMware, it's there are big changes there as well. So it's going to be a very easy discussion, I think, in the future. And going forward, so both with how things are going and with how SA is, and there's a lot of government. I think most government contracts today are SA bound, so it's very simple for them, and same with universities as well. So it's more the private sector, and large corporations have SA. So there's no, yeah.
Oh, definitely. How about you, Ben?
Yeah, I was going to say it's certainly it's a lot of benefits there. And I think the other thing was before, if you were looking at some of those end-to-end scenarios, you're wanting to use AKS, you're looking at adding on your containers and maybe some of the other extensions and stuff, calculating the total cost compared to it was easy before when you're like, yeah, I've got some hosts, I want to run some VMs, I need to license the hosts and the VMs, but by data center it's all inclusive, job done. And so now previously, if I wanted to go to HCI and run containers on AKS, it was kind of like, okay, so I've got to license my Windows VMs that are still on it. I can reuse my data center for that, but I've now got to work out how many cores I'm going to have in my hosts and what that cost is going to be, and then how many cores I need on my AKS boxes to run the containers I want to run, and then if I've got log analytics as well, and it gets really complicated really quickly. So again, by aligning it to the more traditional licensing stance, so if you've got data center and SA, at least that bottom layer of your VMs and your hosts are gone away, and it's nice and simple again. And that also now the hybrid benefit extends up to AKS as well on HCI, which is the other nice thing, right? So for every core you license on the hosts, you get a use right to license a virtual core of AKS on HCI. So all of a sudden that barrier to just trying to work out what's it going to cost me to run some containers on HCI is gone, right? That whole complicated, holy crap, how am I going to work out what my business needs are going to be and what my budget needs to set and all that kind of stuff is just instantly eliminated. Meaning, if you're just someone who wants to dip your toe, or you've just got a couple of containers, you can move on to this platform. And I guess we should also mention this benefit applies to AKS on Windows Server 2019 and above as well. So if you are still, if you haven't yet come up to your hardware refresh cycle and you haven't moved to Azure Stack HCI yet, you can start now consuming AKS on Windows Server through that hybrid use benefit as well. So you're not limited to waiting until you've moved on to HCI to get that. So that's a huge win as well for people trying to get into containers.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing that like this specific software assurance license change isn't just unidirectional for Azure Stack HCI only. Like, it is a software assurance change for the entire license itself. So yeah, if you're like, my production workload, this is like sacrilegious, my production workload of AKS HCI is running on server 2022 because of some. There at the time there was some like Azure Stack HCI proxy issues, like for it to phone home with registration and stuff and the heartbeat, and it was just like, screw it, just put it on server, it's fine, and we'll just keep it there. And now it's like, oh great, like that, those servers are licensed, that physical hardware is already covered under SA, so I'm going to be saving a couple $100 a month for this production Kubernetes cluster. And like, important news, it's not AKS HCI anymore. I think it's what, AKS hybrid, or like the whole thing, soup to nuts, is now like covered under that AKS purview, like in cloud. So if you're tweeting and hashtagging things, I think you got to use the right marketing terms, otherwise they get mad at you. So all right, so software assurance changes, we know that AKS comes along with it. There's some naming changes to AKS that happened. There was also a release that I think just dropped like literally last week too for AKS hybrid. AKS HCI I think is the repo still, so I'm going to call it that. Software-defined networking is generally available now. So if you have an SDN environment and you want to isolate these Kubernetes clusters, that is GA. Cool. You can open up support tickets if you have problems. And I think that's owned by the HCI team as well, or I think the SDN aspect is. So I think the SDN aspect is owned by them. AKS is owned by AKS. So like you're getting like really good support there. You're getting that Azure, that Azure cloud support team that you've always been used to, with good SLAs and stuff. The multiple administrators, this is like, unless you've ever dealt with this, it's a big deal to me because it's burned my ass so many times. Multiple admins on an AKS HCI cluster used to not really be a thing built in. So like if you installed it and you then were like, okay, Ben's the local admin on that box, like Ben, go update the AKS cluster because it's been 90 days. It would just puke and throw errors, and like he would have to run some commands to get certificates to rotate and stuff. That now in the most recent release is kind of like a foregone thing. You can configure admins based on, I think, group membership, or like I think if they're just part of the local administrator group on the host, I think that's all it is. I think it's just built in. So that's cool. This one doesn't affect me, but maybe you guys have run across it. The offline image stuff that is now a thing. Like you can seed the Mariner OS images. So I guess if you have a disconnected data center, but you need to run Kubernetes, I haven't run into that. I don't know if you all have ever had a client that's been in that situation.
We've not got anyone running it today, but it's one that comes up frequently. We have a number of customers, they have sensitive workloads where they don't have it necessarily with internet access, finance, insurance, government, that kind of thing. So the improvements to any scenario that supports more offline connectivity, it makes it a lot easier for those customers to adopt and maintain.
Yep.
And then another sneaky one that I didn't even register until earlier today is the AKS lite announcement. So I haven't even read through this whole blog yet. I just scrolled at the pictures, but I'll leave it to you guys to talk. Like Ben, I think you're the one that sent it, right? Like this looks cool, but I haven't dived into it.
Yeah, and so I mean, it's what we're seeing, and I guess that's part of that rebranding to AKS hybrid, right? Is that we're now seeing AKS almost go AKS anywhere. I'll TM that one for a later copyright infringement, but yeah. So it started out in Azure on the clouds. That was where AKS kind of was born and bred, and we've already seen it start to massively gain adoption on-prem in the data center with AKS HCI. But there is more and more a scenario for Kubernetes to be used out on the edge, in really small deployments. And that's just because of a bunch of the lifecycle and efficiencies that Kubernetes just brings. I mean, the machine learning, crowd has really taken Kubernetes as a way of deploying out their machine learning, algorithms and stuff. So a natural progression is now AKS Lite, which allows you to run, a lightweight Kubernetes cluster on Windows IoT systems. So that can be as small as a Raspberry Pi. In fact, I've seen a few MVPs tweeting already about having got it running up on a Raspberry Pi they had. So this now means you can stick a Raspberry Pi in the back of your factory, grabbing IoT data to your machine learning containers on AKS. and run it the same way. You've got it sending data back to those same containers in your data center or up into your Azure cloud instance. So you've now got that consistency for deploying, your containers from the smallest edge deployment all the way up to your massive scale, learning farms up in Azure. So that's pretty cool just to get that consistent experience across the board now.
Yeah, it looks like the image of like it wants like a device that has a minimum of 8 gigs of RAM, and like I looked at that just now, I'm like, oh man, that's really big. I'm like, no, dude, it's almost 2023. Like that's not a big deal. And
yeah,
these are like the pictures they're showing are of rugged devices, and I don't know, like there's something about that just seems cool. Like you can like throw this thing out of an airplane at 30,000 feet, and if it has like 3G and it's able to phone home, it's like it's collecting data on AKS as it plummets to the earth. Like that seems, I don't know, that seems really cool to me.
Yeah. So that's
and
nice.
and there are also there are a few how should I say, small rugged sized solutions out there from a few vendors as well that fits in your backpack easily. Cosmos showed one at Ignite, I think in 2019, wasn't it? So it's pretty cool. It's a cool feature to and you can scale those down quite a lot. So you can with a lite system you can get these solutions up for minimum cost.
I have in my Amazon cart right now 2 Intel NUCs. Like, and I haven't looked at Intel NUCs in years. Like I have like the old school like 4th generation brick. It's like, but like from 2014, and I'm like, wow, like they've come a really long way, and I'm like, this is like, you sent this, man, and I'm like, this is what I'm doing with it. I'm gonna like maybe I won't do an x64 processor. Maybe I'll like look into something that runs ARM instead. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, super cool.
They also did. They also updated the Mariner Linux OS to version 2.
Yes.
Which is got lots of new improvements, and it's a lot smaller. It's half the size, I think. So it's going to be faster to deploy and download as well than new versions. So that's a pretty good.
So storage improvements. So some storage improvements came to the operating system itself. So in 22H2, the major things at the storage subsystem level are related to resiliency upgrades. So if you have two-way mirror, you can go 3-way mirror, and that's really helpful if you have a single node or a 2-node cluster and you're scaling the nodes up. You don't need to do the whack-a-mole anymore of CSV, make a new volume, migrate your VMs off. Oh, you got to wait for dedupe to run and move more. So like that nuisance is gone. And then the other big thing is thick to thin conversions.
Yeah.
And we're gonna jump into that now. I'm not gonna lie, like this doesn't really, I mean, it's cool for me, but like it doesn't really affect me that much because I'm not doing a lot of like 2-node deployments and then I scale later to 4 nodes. I don't know if you guys have done even it's
more important for the new single node, right? So it's this automation for going from single node to multi-node is where it's really going to make the difference. I mean, a lot of our deployments either they started at 2 nodes and stayed at 2 nodes, or they were kind of 3 or 4 nodes and they've gone up from there. There's very few that went from 2 to 3. I think I have one customer who went from 2 to 3 nodes. Everyone else, started above that or stayed below it. But it's that single node expansion is really where it's useful.
And if you have a 2-node deployment today, I think most deployments today do nested mirror anyway. And as far as I understood it, you can't upgrade from a nested. You can't.
It's mirror to mirror.
From a nested.
It's one way.
Exactly.
It's only of like one type, and it's mirror to mirror. So no map to mirror, no mirror to map, or anything like that.
No, it's 2-way mirror to 3-way mirror, and that's it. So
what was the old name for map? MRV, was that what it used to be called?
It was multi-resilient volumes.
MRV. Yeah.
Yeah.
I still sometimes like will use that in an email. And people are like, what?
Yeah, so it's a nice feature. It's good that they've actually implemented it, and that you can upgrade from a 2-way mirror or from a single node to a 2-node cluster. without a problem, and the fact that you can go from a 2-node to a 3-node cluster if you're running a two-way mirror only.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, but I actually like the other thing with the thick to thin conversion.
Yes.
That is a really nice that you can actually convert your thick storage pool to a thin storage pool, and having your volumes free up space in the pool.
Mm-hmm. We tend to like. We've always been very cautious about provisioning VHDXs that are thin, and if they were, we would put them on a thick provision virtual disk, vdisk meaning like CSV. Now that I can kind of like gauge, I guess, usage over time, it's cool to be able to transition. Do we know? I think you can do thin to thick, right? Like you can have always done that. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
that seems trivial to.
I think
I don't know. I don't know the answer. It seems like trivial that it should be able to do it. Just zeroing out a bunch of.
I don't think it was stated.
Command would be to do that.
I don't. I've just assumed it was always a thing. Now I gotta look now.
Yeah, but
you're gonna make me want to log into a lab somewhere now to see if I can run the command.
Yeah. So in Windows Admin Center, it's just a button, right, to tick. So it's I'm guessing you can tick that back. So maybe it's either an on or off or false or true or something like that. I haven't checked the commands.
Yeah, I've only done it at provisioning. I've never tried to convert a volume to thick.
Yeah. But it's interesting. But yeah, I remember the old days with VMware and thin provisioning, and people are we have like 50 gig terabyte of storage, but we've provisioned 100 terabytes. And we're like, yeah, but what happens when you reach 50 terabyte of usage and you still have 50 terabyte free on your volumes? Yeah, don't worry about it. Oh shit, we ran out of space.
Yeah,
nothing's working anymore.
Well, I mean, even before, even with like equal logic volumes and stuff, like SAN. Like, yeah, I know. Right. That like the same thing. A NetApp, it's always been a thing you have to be aware of. But like this. I don't know. Just this is nice to just be able to go back to it if you want.
Yeah, it's as an administrator of this solution, you have to monitor, you have to check, but the good thing is with Azure Stack HCI, it has the monitoring capabilities to predict.
Actually, that's one thing I haven't checked. Is so like the built-in like storage alerts were not aware of thin provision volumes previously.
I don't know.
Yeah, and I don't know if they fixed that. It was a bug that would need to be fixed in the health service.
In the health service.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah,
I don't know, but you have the storage pool capacity check, so it will, tell you.
Yeah, I think the problem was the storage pool capacity check didn't understand thin provision volumes. So if you provisioned all of your storage as thin volumes, the storage pool health check would be like, I'm out of space. And you're like, but you're not though.
Yeah, but they must have fixed that, because you get an alert now if you're over 70%, I think, or 80% of your storage pool used. So it'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see. I haven't tested it because I haven't upgraded my own cluster to 22H2. I'm going to be doing that next week, and it's a small cluster, so I'm like 95% used. So I don't even have enough space to lose a drive. So
yeah, that's important. Make sure when you buy your hardware, you buy it to what you actually need. But no, I know it's a home lab. I know.
No, it's I'm borrowing it, so it's not even mine. So
it's okay. Favors. I'm running 22H2 downstairs on an old desktop right now that has 2 SATA drives in it that they have PLP, and I think everything I've made is thin provision, so I'll just go and make some big ass files on there later and make a bunch of virtual disks that are thin and see what the health service says. I'm curious now.
Yeah, you have at least hardware that can run 2022.
I mean, debatable. It's definitely not certified. Yeah.
No. But my Gen 6 hardware cannot.
No, that's not good. Dude, don't even bother. Don't even bother. CPUs are just going to explode on you.
Yeah.
So networking. network improvements, big network improvements that are in HCI 22H2. I will admit I have only played with network ATC in a lab. I have not deployed. I've not touched it because my production stuff is running older versions of Azure Stack HCI. So I can't really contribute to this other than NetATC and Network HUD are now generally available. So how about you guys? Have you touched it?
I mean, so I've been using Network ATC, at least the 21H2 version, for a couple of customers now, and I can say that the additions that come in 22H2 will make a huge difference for where we have been using it. So things like it automatically IP addressing the storage interfaces now will make life a lot easier, because that was like an annoyance. Like you set up your networking, we used to have to go remember to put all the IP addresses on and stuff. And some more of the symmetric checks around making sure that the network adapters you're using on your hosts are actually the same make and model and speed, and as opposed to before, I think it only checked that the speed was consistent across all your nodes. So there are those benefits were things that have caught customers out in the past, and we've seen that, whether it was just the extra work that was required or just not catching some small differences, like if someone happened to be using a ConnectX-3 adapter and a ConnectX-3 Pro adapter, which look almost identical if you're just looking at the names, but the feature set in them is quite a bit different. So those like quality of life improvements and network ATC are awesome, and the work that they're doing with the hardware vendors as well to be able to detect more of the switch configuration as time goes on is going to make, if you're using RDMA based networking rather than IWAP, those were the things that always caught customers out and caused problems. And if you're a customer who had missed a setting between the switch and the hosts, you didn't always see the problem until it came to like your first maintenance window and you were doing patching and rebuilds were happening, and like the NICs were getting smashed suddenly, and because you didn't have PFC configured correctly, things would just fall over. So the more checks they're adding into these sort of network ATC and network HUD stuff is going to make a huge improvement to making sure customers avoid that downtime.
How many times in the Slack channel have we seen someone come in and ask like the questions, like all the bullet points you just hit, where they're like, why isn't this working, or why is my performance garbage? And it's like VLAN tag or doing something weird with Rocky settings on the host. I think that
too many times.
Yeah. Or just
way
using like you said, mismatched NICs, or like assuming that the NIC they're using supports RDMA and it doesn't. I think there's room for growth though in that ATC. I don't know if they're gonna ever start like getting neurotic about like driver and firmware versions. I don't know if that really falls, like that onus falls on Microsoft to kind of enforce, but it's something. It's better than just like running raw PowerShell and checking yourself.
I haven't looked into it yet. I will do once I've upgraded my cluster to 22H2. But it looks on paper very interesting. The really cool thing is it stores the network configuration. So if you're expanding a node or expanding with a new node, the new node will pick up all the correct configurations. I'm looking forward to seeing how it actually works in real life, how it will configure the cluster networking correctly. For me, it's never been a problem because I have full control of how I do the networking. But I understand for clients that if I'm not available and they need to add a new node, I can just tell them, well, yeah, just make sure it's on the right OS version and it has this and this installed, and then just plug it into the cluster and it will automatically do everything for you, and it will remediate all the networking stuff for you. And I'm looking forward to seeing how it will affect the switching, because, like you said, there are so many clients with network solutions that are not, working for the current solution, and they don't always know how to configure the switches correctly.
Yeah.
and that's a big problem as well. So it's the other day I got a question, does sets support LACP? And I was like, please read the documentation. So it's going to be really nice, and I'm hoping they do a really good, that the visualization is going to be something that is going to be easy to read and understand. I haven't, like I said, I haven't looked too much into it, but what Dan has been talking about is really promising. So looking forward to it.
You're right. That is one of the big parts, right? Is the cluster expansion scenario, because many times customers may have had their existing cluster in place for like a year or two, and maybe the consultant or the in-house guy who built it isn't there anymore or isn't available, and so someone having to go through previously and like query the existing nodes to figure out what the config is to then apply them to the new ones, right? So the fact that it will now automatically just push out the exact same config each time. Will again speed up that ability to do cluster expansions.
Yeah, and it will override any manual things you do on the cluster as well, because you have to change the ATC settings in the cluster for it to change it. So if somebody fiddles with the networking settings on the server, it will just correct it.
Yeah. As Ernie found out the other day with live migration settings, which snuck their way into to 21H2, where live migration is now set at the cluster level and applied to all nodes. So there's more of that coming through.
And it's not just live migration; it's SMB, like the throttle on SMB transfers. It's a bunch of things that are just. And it makes sense. Like, it should be at the cluster level if you have a cluster, because again, why should you have to worry about why would you ever have a single node configured differently? I mean, unless you're doing some kind of weird triage, troubleshooting, trying to eliminate some, like that is something, again, trying to keep it simple, stupid. Like, you have clients that may not, like JT said, drop ship them the server, tell them to install the PowerShell command, let's plug it in and go. Like, it should just be, desired state config just kind of takes care of it.
Yeah, and we have I use a very big checklist, the PowerShell script that checks everything I actually do and set on a cluster. Now I've been using VMM for years, like you guys do, and deploy nodes that way. So everything gets correctly, but sometimes the script fails, and it's not always VMM gives you a good error report. So, checking the configuration, what was applied, what was not, is, always a good thing. With this, you set it on the cluster, and it's automatically remediated on the cluster by the cluster, which is really nice. So yeah, this is a huge improvements and will help clients. It makes it a lot easier for clients, and our post deployment script for storage spaces for S2D is long. It is a few hundred lines long. We code to set things, and the networking stuff is like 70 or 90. I think it's 90 lines of code basically to set the networking stuff. So yeah, this will help a lot.
Absolutely. All right, so that's, I'm pretty sure that the meat and potatoes of the OS improvements.
Yeah.
There's some other things when it comes to hybrid, the hybrid cloud, the push, if you will, to hybrid that Microsoft is kind of, everyone's moving towards it. My company's got products that they brand as that too. AVD on HCI, or AVD for HCI. I don't know what the preposition is supposed to be there, but the kind of the elephant in the room, and I think we all agree, like, on paper, Azure Virtual Desktop's on-prem, where you don't need to manage infrastructure on-prem. You just, here's my VMs, here's my session hosts, just like do it, is like the killer app, and like a potential Citrix killer. But here we are at post-Ignite, and there's still not really an official timeline for GA. There's still no pricing. But I can tell you, I'm running it in production right now, and it's public preview 1. So like, what about you guys? Like, do you have people that are like, I need this yesterday?
Yeah, so they've actually finalized the name, I think, now, because in the official post for the blog post for AVD, it says Azure Virtual Desktop for Azure Stack HCI.
Okay.
So it's the preview is complicated. Let's just say that the MS Lab script is like 2,000 something lines long to deploy it. So it's very easy to do, but it's a very long line of code that you have to do, and it works really well compared to the Azure Resource Bridge deployment, which is still complicated.
We'll get to
It's still complicated. But I really like it. I run it locally as well. For my cluster, I have it. It's my way to get into my environment when I'm not here. I used to do a RDP gateway logging in, but now I don't have to have anything open into my cluster or into my environment, and I use Azure Virtual Desktop, and it works really nice, and it's super fast. That is the insane thing. It is insanely fast.
Yeah, and I think but with all the hybrid working going on as well, there's still a lot of companies out there who have either their networks or their applications are still designed for people to be bums on seats in an office building somewhere. And what the easiest paths to transition people is to set up something like AVD in their office, or at least on their network. And then, when people are working at home from an airport, from a cafe or whatever, they still can access all those secure resources in a standard way. It makes life for IT departments easier for standardizing the rollout of apps and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, everyone understands, the VDI and AVD benefits. They've both been around for, a millennia now, but the ability to have all that automation and, the not having to worry about, like you say, you don't have to run your own RD gateway. That's all provided by Azure. You don't have to manage your connection brokers. That's all done by Azure. You don't have to worry about your certificates. That's all done by Azure. So all those benefits of AVD, but being able to get it, in the location where you need your desktops deployed, whether it's for latency or security or whatever it is, it's a winning combination. I don't think anyone thinks this is a bad idea. The bated breath is just on that timeline and that price, right? Everyone's waiting to see where those things fall. There are a number of people trying it and just waiting to see.
And on the security side, it's insane with what you're getting. You're getting the full weight of Azure, all the security features with conditional access, identity governance, and all of that. And with conditional access, you have so many, depending on what kind of environment you're connecting to, you can actually spin up a secure zone environment locally or in Azure, and you can secure it insanely good because you have all the security features you have in Azure, and with Sentinel on top of that, it's probably one of the most secure solutions out there for virtual desktops. So it's insane. And I'm actually working for a health provider here in Norway now. They run VMware Horizon, and it's come up that they need a VDI solution for Windows 7, which is only supported to running on Azure
Stack HCI with ESU.
Yeah.
Yes, correct. So, Azure Virtual Desktop, you can run it in Azure as well, but they need it as a secure environment because they have certain legacy apps that are now getting to a point where they have to run it on Windows 7, and it's not supported to run the Windows 7 image on anything else than Azure. That includes Azure Stack HCI. So it's getting. So they actually talked to me about AVD a few weeks ago, and it's going to be a very interesting conversation when we get to that, because it's giving organizations a relief to run older applications that cannot run on newer OSs that can actually run on Windows 7. I actually had a client asking for Windows XP the other day, but that's yeah.
Put that in Azure in its own VNet, and you go into it through Bastion, and you have to recite a seance before you connect to it to make sure you're not getting some kind of disease.
Yeah, and I did a session a couple of weeks ago at a conference about AVD, And one of the things we did talk about was the latency to your AVD session hosts. And with RDP short path, you bypass any Azure services. So you connect directly to the session host, meaning if you're in your office or you're connecting via VPN, you're going directly into your office or to your data center. So you're lowering the latency. If I go without short path, I have about 58 millisecond latency. With short path, if I'm sitting at home, it's less than 1 millisecond.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. And I
So
can tell you, I could say like we've had and like caveat there, like you don't need to be VPN or in the same building too. You can even you can do some static NATing at the firewall to even open up those ports that like if you want, if you just want it to like not even, you don't even want to deal with VPN anymore, you could still get the benefits of short path.
So, it can go out via your public internet access as well. So you'll bypass Azure, which is insane for latency. So it's getting really good, and they have actually added the Azure Virtual Desktop Insights now. So you get more insights into your VMs as well. And there are more monitoring solutions. I even realized in the old Azure Update Management solution, you couldn't patch your AVD session hosts, but with the new Azure Update Management Center that's in preview, your AVD session host actually now shows up to be able to be patched. So that's really good as well. So I
mean, the big negative here though with AVD on-prem, AVD for Azure Stack HCI is right, as I've just learned what the real name is now. The pricing, like I said that earlier, like the lack of knowledge, the lack of pricing, and we can guess, like we know that the AKS hybrid pricing with software assurance kind of got consumed, but we can't assume those changes are going to happen because a Windows 10 multi-session host, like that's not covered by a server 2022 data center. Like, that's not like there's no correlation there. So, there's like 3 layers of potential cost here. There's the Azure Stack HCI, like the OS itself, which if you have software assurance, it's free now, but you're still paying for something. There's the license if you're, what is it, like E3, E5?
It's Windows.
The Windows licensing itself.
And you can buy the Windows 10 Enterprise license or Windows 10 11 Enterprise license, or you can buy anything that contains that. So it's either,
which for a lot of people, if you have E3, like I think we have E5 where I'm at, and for all the Office products and stuff. So like that's a wash. But again, if you're small mom pod, probably not.
Yeah, it's even covered in the F3 license. It's even covered in the F3 license. So you have the VDI license there. So it gives you the benefits. I think it's only the A licenses, the really cheap one, the kiosk ones that are not giving it. Everything else actually gives you the Windows 10 Enterprise license that you need to be able to use.
It's the third layer, the AVD, like the let me pass the bits through your gateway license, pay the toll troll, and that's what we don't know yet.
There are rumors, but we're not talking about rumors, so we don't know anything. It's basically it's still in the unknown. But I'm hoping it's not going to be expensive, because it's when you're bringing your own hardware. What?
It's a real winner, right? It's going to drive people to want HCI on-prem. It's going to drive a whole bunch of other services, right? People are going to end up, like you say, you integrate Sentinel with it. So there's a whole bunch of that coming through. There's all the other bits and pieces that come with it. It's an enabler. An
enabler is a very good term. Exactly. That is exactly the way I would phrase it.
It's the carrot. The carrot you put in front of the customers, right? They all want it.
Yeah. But it's the only multi-session version solution for Windows 10, Windows 11, or Windows 7. You cannot run multi-session on, for instance, Citrix. Well, Citrix doesn't support Windows 10, Windows 11.
You literally, the bits, the OS itself cannot run on any other hypervisor platform unless it is an Azure OS.
Yeah. And there are some benefits as well for Office 365 for Office 365 and Teams on AVD as well. It works a lot better because I'm running on this one client we're running VMware Horizon, and it's horrible. I have a 4K screen, and it's so laggy. You wouldn't believe how laggy it is. I can write something, and it just takes. Once I'm finished writing, it can sometimes take 10 seconds before it's finished writing. So
interesting.
Yeah.
So we also know that they are going to allow custom. Well, you have your custom images on-prem if you want. You will be able to tie this into marketplace images as well, and that kind of correlates to. We're kind of getting to the end of our discussion here, but the I kind of call it the Arc enabled stuff, all the Arc enabled things that were announced. And one of them, like the big thing is Resource Bridge, which is basically a small little, there's a service that runs on the OS, WSSD cloud or agent, I forget what it's called. There's a small VM that gets deployed that runs like the equivalent of Minikube. It's a single node AKS cluster basically that has a bunch of APIs, and that interfaces with the underlying host. And now and this is what we were saying before, it's a pain in the ass to set up, but once it's all set up, you get you have the ability to extend your Azure Stack HCI cluster as a custom location from the cloud itself. And one of those things will be to allow custom images or marketplace images to be used in AVD HCI. So I got it running last night for the first time, and good Lord, it was very painful. JT, I think you tried it, right? Like you tried using it.
Oh, I've done it multiple times. I've had lots of issues with it. It was very buggy this spring, and it was giving me a hard time. And the commands were failing, and if you misspell, if there was something not correctly, it was giving you really hard, strange error messages. But yeah, it's at the moment it's really difficult. When it works, it works really well. If it fails, it's a little bit difficult to find the correct cause of the failure. But I know they are working on making this a lot easier to onboard. So hopefully it's going to be. I'm hoping for a single command to do this, or a button to enable it in Windows Admin Center. I tried the Windows Admin Center onboarding. It doesn't work.
Didn't work for me either.
So it's it's a good feature. It will make it so that we can have our manage our VMs from Azure Arc. It will bring the VMs in as an Azure VM or an Azure Arc VM, which is equal to an Azure VM. So we will get all the at one point get all the benefits an Azure VM has.
Extensions and other things.
Yeah, well, the big things, right? ARM templates, like being able to now do your deployments programmatically. Because I mean, let's be honest, the one of the things Hyper-V always lacked was a programmatic way of doing that kind of stuff. Like PowerShell's there, but there wasn't an API you could hit. We're all familiar with having used various system center products as middle layers to do that. But this will give you the full ARM templating, the ARM interface for that. So that's going to be awesome. It means you get Bicep, Terraform's probably going to turn up, all those traditional tools. Well, that's not traditional tools. All those infrastructure as code tools that I guess I think of as traditional now because they've been around for so long. Will now be available for your on-prem stuff. And the other big piece is the marketplace preview that they announced, right? Which is that's one of the golden gooses of Azure, is the massive marketplace you have access to up there for images.
Yeah, it's a bit limited right now to a few Windows 10 and Windows 11 and a few Windows Server. I think it's just the Windows Server 22 Azure edition, right?
Yeah. So, but I mean, it's in preview at the moment, so it makes sense to not have the entire thing available. But it's great, right? So like we said before, like if you were setting up AVD, you've got to go through the steps of manually downloading the AVD images before for your Windows 10, Windows 11 multi-session. Whereas now, with that marketplace preview, you can sync the images down. Azure Edition, you know, we haven't really touched on that yet, but the Windows Server 2022 Azure Edition as well is a huge win up in Azure with things like hot patching if you can run the core edition, SMB over quick if you ever looked at that. That's a really cool feature. And of course, you know, you can now sync those images down through the marketplace preview and run them on your Azure Stack HCI cluster as well. So that Azure Edition is coming down because Azure Stack HCI is an Azure OS, right? It's an Azure product. So that extension is now coming through that resource bridge.
And again, like just to hit on the like how big the marketplace thing is, and like I'm not trying to like play cheerleader for my own company, but as an ISV, Commvault has images in marketplace. There's obviously dozens, hundreds, thousands of other companies that have images in marketplace with their software pre-installed, pre-configured with specific image, like specific builds of software on there. This will get to a point where you can just grab that from an ISV from just anyone out there and just drop it on your on-prem hardware. And that's a big deal.
Well, there was a wee nugget I noticed slip through in the Azure Marketplace announcements, and that was that they're bringing Kubernetes-based apps now to Azure Marketplace. So if you're an ISV developing apps and you want to develop them as a like an operator for Kubernetes, you can now put those Kubernetes apps straight into you know, into the marketplace. And if I was taking pot shots and forward guesses, I'd say, you know, you've got things lining up. You've got HCI. You've now got AKS on your HCI. You know, you can Arc enable that whole stack. You've got Resource Bridge. You've got the marketplace now there. You know, there's a future where ISVs will be able to publish Kubernetes apps that you can deploy to your AKS cluster on-prem on HCI.
Yep.
You know,
all driven through the portal with like one click or
your own templates as well, right?
Pipeline.
You know, bicep, all this. You know, so you know, if you look, all these pieces are starting to line up in Microsoft's portfolio, and you know, the HCI is going to be that centerpiece that basically allows you to run Azure anywhere. You know, it's really it's becoming that edge extension for ISVs and for your own environment.
Yeah, and I had this conversation as well with a client that they run Cisco appliances, and he was like, "Yeah, can I?" So you're saying at one point I might be able to just click on a Cisco appliance in Azure Marketplace, deploy it to my Azure Stack HCI cluster? Hopefully, yes. Sometime in the future, that's what the direction is looking to go. And he was like, "Oh, I don't have to. So I can just buy it from there." And this is interesting.
Yeah, and billing is a completely different thing now. It just makes life easy. Enabler. It's an enabler to make life easier for people.
Yeah, and it you know, the UI deployment in Azure is quite simple. It's really easy to understand, and even the bicep and the ARM templates, it's, you know, that's more complicated. But doing this with bicep and creating templates and doing this at scale is going to make it, you know, so much easier for admins to manage. Yes, there is a curve to learn Azure and to learn all of this, but you have to at one point anyway. And as a consultant, I see this quite a lot, that the you know, the lack of Azure experience or knowledge is quite big. So you have to, you know, just embrace it, because it's if it's not Azure, it's AWS or Google Cloud or something else, because it's going in this direction that things are being more and more cloudified. So yeah, it's but it's a good thing, I think, because it's giving you access to things you never had before on-prem.
I think it's a good thing too. Like, so Ben said something earlier that piqued my interest about Hyper-V never had a proper API, and like that the way that was kind of like hacky slacky put together was you had to have System Center VMM, you need to have SPF on top of that, you needed to understand like this undocumented beast of an API that hasn't been updated in a decade. And here we are now, it's 2022, about to be 2023, and there's still nothing equivalent to that. This is going to be that equivalent. Like, at the end of the day, the writing is on the wall. This is how, if you want to provide self-service VMs or UAT environments for your developers that are still using traditional VMs, and you don't want to incur the cost in the cloud, and you have all these other things we talked about. You have data center licenses, you have software assurance on top of it, and you have the hardware already. This is what it's going to be at the end of the day. And same thing for AVD. This is how the automation for that is probably going to be driven, because how else, like if this is what all these stars are aligning, how else is this going to work?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned, if you've got the hardware, right? So Microsoft has seen a few people go, I don't really have hardware for that, right?
That is a segue. That is great.
King of segues right there. But a lot of people have come from traditional SAN and server architectures, right? A lot of people, we saw massive adoption of storage spaces direct in Server 2019 and Server 2016. But there are a lot of people who hug their SANs still, or had massive investments in SANs. It's not something you give up straight away. And so if you've got branch sites, for example, where you've not got any hardware today, or it is just really old desktops in a corner, I see a lot of that around. Microsoft's, it's not their first foray into hardware. They've been the Azure Stack Edge appliances for a while. They've just announced, coming next year, there's the Azure Pro 2, which is going to be a fully integrated, order through your Azure portal, Microsoft Azure Stack HCI hardware you can buy on your Azure consumption, right? So it potentially for some of those use cases, where you don't have an existing footprint, or you just want AVD, for example, and your existing infrastructure is fine the way it is, then this could be a way for customers to get that on a per monthly basis, in those environments.
And we've always heard like eat your own dog food and stuff. There's goodness, I've spoken to too many people at Microsoft support about like the disparity of hardware and what their developers are developing on, and sometimes they're not even developing on hardware, they're developing on VMs, so like they don't run into hardware issues when you're talking about kernel level drivers and stuff. So from a Microsoft perspective, forget about vendors for a second, forget about like consultancy or anyone that's selling hardware and making money off of this. From a strictly like, at the end of the day, the developers that are writing the code are going to be using this hardware. They're going to have a stable set of hardware. They're going to run into problems because they're going to finally be able to touch it, and they're going to be able to more rapidly. And I think the analogy that we've always, this is like, look how much better Microsoft Surface got. Or let me rephrase that. How Windows 10 and Windows 11 got once Surface was announced. That's what I'm trying to say there. Like that hardware enabled, to use that term again, it enabled the developers to make a better product. So I mean, I'll probably never buy one. A lot of people will probably never buy one, but I think it is a good thing for everyone, including the DataONs, the Dells, the Lenovos of the world, that like they have their market. This is not what that market feels like. This is more, like you said, remote branch office. They need something. They know what it is. It's very tiny. Boom.
Yeah, it's I don't think it's a threat to OEMs at all. The ability, because the other thing, right, these will be fixed appliances. They will come in a set size, right? So if you fit into one of those sizes and that need matches you, then sure, I'll have it. But I mean, we all know every deployment is somewhat different from every other deployment. JT, you'll come across this with all the work you do with your customers, right? No two customers really ever want the exact same thing, whether it's even just like variations on the GPUs they potentially want, the size of the SSDs, whether, how much performance they want, how many SSDs we're putting in it, all that work we do as consultants and, even internally with the teams we're supporting, that the OEMs will have a much broader catalog that, and a much broader level of expertise. They can help navigate, what the right options to put in these boxes are. So there's no problem there. And like you say, with Microsoft having to eat their own dog food and learning, what it takes to do these deployments, now they're owning the hardware stack as well. All the tooling that OEMs have to deal with is going to improve as well. So the experience of those OEMs, as Microsoft learns what it takes to deploy these things, is going to make their lives easier as well.
Yeah, and like you said, it's a limited hardware solution or specification. So it's not like it's, I think the biggest one is like 256 gig of memory, and
it's not big.
So it's an 8 terabyte of usage per node or something like that.
They're also like the half depth, I think, too.
Yes.
They're not. These are not your traditional pizza box
They're not
heavy
designed to be
workload
a data
servers.
And
center.
they're one CPU, I think, as well. So they're not really big, and they are I think for a client that has, let's say, hundreds of satellite offices where they need this, or a branch offices, or let's say a retail store, and they don't want to do the hardware buy, and they're unsure of, okay, we have 1,000 sites we need to set up. I know somebody in Australia in the early days of Storage Spaces Direct was going to do a 2-node small setup for hundreds of or thousands of retail stores in Australia, and the share of managing this was intense. And with this, it might be really simple because you get something pre-configured, you send it out, it gets on the internet, you get it on the network, and then boom, it's up and it's connected to Azure, and you have full connection to it. And then if something fails, it's Microsoft, yes, only Microsoft to contact, nobody else. It's a little bit similar to the validated nodes that the Azure Stack HCI program has, where there's one single contact, one single person for every, or one supplier for all the problems.
Unified experience there.
Exactly. But at a smaller scale, and a OPEX, it's OPEX, right? Payment process via the Azure portal, and you have, you pay one place. So it's interesting.
Keeps the bean counters happy, and it's not to say that other vendors don't offer
No.
I'm sure there's pay as you go, not like lease to own. I don't even know, is lease to own even a thing?
It is. We do sell hardware, so and we do have, we do Lenovo, and Lenovo has a program for buying it as a service.
Yeah, I think most hardware vendors these days have a finance option, available.
So you can so you can buy it, pay monthly, and they do that, but you don't get it through the Azure portal. That's the big thing. You don't get it through the Azure portal. You have to pay the HCI license through the portal, but then you have to pay somebody else for the hardware. So it's interesting. If I can, I'll probably try and order one.
I think we're all going to try. Pull some strings.
I've seen the MVPs talking about this, and they I want to order one. I want to order two.
Yeah.
So, but the thing is, they do come with GPU. So the smallest one doesn't come with, but the option 2 and 3 comes with a GPU. But they are reasonably priced per month, so it's not. I think the lowest one is 64 gig. The second one is 128, and then 256 for the biggest one. And it's not. And like you said, it's somebody had mentioned it's it looks like the Azure Stack Edge Pro 2, right?
It's the same thing.
Same hardware.
Same chassis. At least the marketing images is literally exactly the same.
Yeah.
I'm sure someone will put it up in post here. It's probably over our faces right now.
Yeah.
We'll get the images and put them side by side.
So it's interesting, but there's been no timeline, right, when it will be released. It's available. You have the link now, or the buy. You can get to the point of, but there's nothing listed as to buy. But it's in the Azure portal in the marketplace, but there's no buy.
What did it say? It said early 2023 or something.
Yeah, I think the blog post for it says 2023 coming.
Okay.
So we expect to see it next year sometime.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see when that actually happens. We'll see.
I mean, they're going to have the same problem everyone else has, right? No one can buy hardware at the moment because there seems to be this weird shortage thing going on.
It's horrible. We've had systems been delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed. So it's horrible. It's a 4 to 6 to 9 months delay on hardware, depending on what you actually need. There are certain things that you can get faster, and certain things, if you need something very big spec, it's the it's the large SSDs or NVMe's and the large CPUs and the large memory disks,
network
memory
switches.
modules.
Network switches are like at a premium right now. I can't find those damn things anywhere.
Yeah, I think Mellanox quoted us 9 to 10 months to get switches.
Oh my god!
So it's a pain basically these days, and I know network cards are a big problem as well. So it's going to be interesting. But I like the point that they said that it's, you can order it through the portal, and a couple of weeks later you have it if it's in stock.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we'll see how it goes. I think it's cool. I don't, like you said, I don't know if we're gonna like be able to get our hands actually on one as like just a single human with like, I don't know, make an LLC, I guess, to mask it. But no, it's only good for the ecosystem. I mean, I didn't touch a Surface device for a decade, and now I'm like, yeah, it's pretty good, and it probably made development better. So it's only the more people that put their weight behind HCI, I think is a net positive, no matter how you cut it. So,
but it definitely shows for anyone who hadn't yet worked out that Microsoft was committed to this Azure Stack HCI thing. You know, it puts a line in the sand, right? When they start making their own hardware for it, they are committed to this path. You know, HCI is not going anywhere.
Yeah.
No, and we're seeing that with the other cloud vendors as well, that they're seeing that on-prem, that they have to expand their portfolio to on-prem as well, because it's not only cloud anymore, like they've been preaching for the last 10 years. It is a multi-cloud or hybrid, basically, and that's, we're going to see more and more, I think, bringing the cloud on-prem and leveraging the cloud features on-prem, because that's where I think the gold is.
All right, guys. Well, look, thank you so much for the time. I think we hit on just about everything. There's a lot of stuff. I'll make sure that the link to the Microsoft Ignite book of news, which is just this really big website that you can go through and read all the marketing terminologies and announcements that came out. We'll try to get that link into, I guess, the description of wherever this video shows up, YouTube, Twitter, I don't know, wherever it is, so people can scan through. And I'll make sure that personal websites, blogs, GitHub, Twitter feeds for you guys are in there as well, because we gotta drive engagement. Thanks again, really, like, super appreciate it. This was fun.
Thanks for arranging this, man. It's been great to catch up with you both.
Yeah.